Okay. All right. Well, everybody, maybe, 2 months ago, you got to meet my gunsmith, or at least the backside of him, which we're showing again here. He is a private person like myself. Unfortunately, my face is now on the internet, so we'll go ahead and do the video this way. When we were down in your shop last time, we covered a couple really good topics, and people kept saying, we wanted to see more stuff. What can your gunsmith teach us? We want to learn something. And you've actually had some people contact you, and what's the thing that people are asking about right now?
They want to know how to design a reamer.
Okay, so designing a reamer. Now, you guys have heard me talk about reamers. I've either used them, in fact, today I made a video where I kind of cleaned out a die I had and kind of opened up the neck just a little bit with my reamer. People use them to remove the carbon ring, which we don't always recommend. Reamers obviously are designed so that a gunsmith can repeatably chamber your gun in a given caliber. The best I can say is around here we tend to use JGS reamers.
Yes.
And they're a really great company to work with. They're only a couple hours from us, but aside from that, they're just a really great company. Standard reamer runs about how much to make?
Geez, 2.5.
2.5, okay. I know there's things you want to talk about. I know for me, the first question I always had was standard or carbide? Before we get into the designing aspect, I know that's going to...
Standard versus carbide. If you're going to set back barrels that's been treated with any kind of chemical hardness or whatever, like some of the guys now are treating their actions with, what do you call it?
Titanium nitride or...
Yeah. So a standard reamer won't cut that. So if you've got a barrel that's been nitrided and you're going to set it back, you're going to have a carbide reamer. I don't use carbide reamers unless I absolutely have to, because there's some things about them I don't like.
Okay.
For one thing, they don't drill and tap the front to put the screw in to change the bushing. They put a little clip on there, which is a real pain to get on and off. And they don't do some things on the back that I like.
Okay. So just a standard steel,
high-speed
steel. That's really all anybody needs if they're getting one made, right?
That's right.
And how many chamberings, if a gunsmith's doing their job right, because I heard some wild numbers, when I started out. I heard, a reamer only lasts you 2 or 3 chamberings, and I've heard a reamer lasts you 50 chamberings. What's your experience?
I've got a 6BR reamer that's probably got 35, 40 chambers on it.
Wow.
So I really don't know. It depends on, I hog a lot of material out, so the reamer doesn't cut much. So and if you get the feed and speed right and the right kind of lubricant, they'll last a long time.
Okay. So typically the shorter numbers on uses is from abuse or incorrect use?
Yes.
You'd say? Okay.
Yes. Or trying to feed them in too fast, or not the right kind of oil.
Oh, okay. Well, as a non-machinist, some of that's over my head, but that's why I give you the reamer and the barrels.
I've got a neighbor down the road who works for a big oil company, and he makes my cutting oil for me, and it has a high sulfur content, which is what you need to get smooth cut, and so that works out really well.
Oh, that's cool. So kind of from a reamer perspective, what did you want to talk about?
Well, people ask me about how do you go about designing a reamer, and it's actually pretty easy once you learn the parameters and once you learn how to read a print a little bit.
This happens for those that don't know. Let me just show you real quick. This is what we're talking about. Honestly, I forgot I had it in my pocket, but this is what a reamer looks like, and that's just a standard high-speed steel chambering reamer. Yeah. So anyway, go ahead, Terry.
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the brass to fit your chamber really well, and vice versa. And what some guys do is they'll just buy a standard reamer and a standard full-length sizer, and then they'll send their fired cases to somebody and have them make them a custom die. Or you can have, like some of the guys done, they've had a resize reamer made, which is typically 2 or 3 thousandths smaller than a standard reamer. And then they'll buy a Newland die and will ream that out. And you may or may not have to have it hardened.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of money. You got to buy an extra reamer, you got to buy the die, you got to pay to have the die reamed, and then maybe pay to have it hardened. There's another way to do it that actually works a little better. I call it the backdoor custom reamer. And what you do is you call up your favorite reamer maker and have them send you a reamer print of whatever it is you're working with. Let's say a 6.5 Creed, for example.
Okay.
Buy the die the full length sizer die that you're going to use and the brass that you're going to use.
So any brand brass, like if I say, oh, for whatever reason, I'm going to shoot Alpha, or I'm going to shoot Peterson, whatever, I buy that brass and I go buy an RCBS, a Hornady, any off-the-shelf die.
Yeah,
Okay.
or like most of us use Wilson bushing dies.
Yeah.
So, take the die to your favorite gunsmith and have him do a chamber cast of it, because we want to know what the inside dimensions of that die is. So, give the die and the brass and the reamer print to your gunsmith, and give it to me. In my case, what I'm going to do is on the reamer print, you'll see from the bolt face in towards the front of the case, there's what they call a 200 thousandths number. That's where the web is. So we're going to take a micrometer and we're going to measure that casting that came out of the full length sizer die at the 200 thousandths mark, and we're also going to measure it right at the shoulder body junction.
Okay.
Right at the front where
And so I'll draw it real quick just so that you guys kind of get an idea here. But if we've got, that's extreme. And then we'll just call this.
Yeah, so we're going to measure right there, and we're going to measure at the 200 thousandths.
And the 200 thousandths line is literally,
where the web is.
it's literally going to be 200 thousandths from the base in.
Yes, that's right where the web is. That's past the solid part of the head.
Yeah, so it's typically going to be about in this area.
Yeah, that's where you're going to get your expansion.
Okay. So we're going to measure there, and you're going to measure there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to measure that, and we're going to measure the brass in the same two places.
Okay.
And then we're going to look at the print, and let's just say on the print at the 200 thousandths mark on a JGS print, it'll say, if I remember right, it'll say 0.714. In other words, 471 and a half thousandths. Okay, the other thing you want to keep in mind while you're taking these measurements is you want to look on the print and see what their tolerances are. On JGS, it's plus a half a thousandths.
Okay.
On some of the reamer manufacturers, it's minus a quarter, plus a quarter, whatever. On JGS, there's no minus. It's only plus.
Okay.
So you'll never get an undersized reamer. You'll only get a reamer that's to spec, or on occasion maybe just a hair over.
Okay.
All right. So let's say on the print it says 471.4. We measure the brass, and typically with the Lapua brass, it'll be at the web, it'll be about 469.
Okay.
And we take the measurement off of the casting that came out of the die, and let's say it's 469. So what I would do is I would bump that 471 up to 472. That'd give me a full 3 thousandths, and you're going to say, well, that's a little big. On brand new brass, it might be, but you got to keep in mind that down the road, after you've sized that brass and fired it 4 or 5 times, when you size it, it's going to spring back.
Yeah.
So instead of having brass that's 469, you're going to have brass now that's 47,
Okay.
47 and a 0.5, maybe in extreme cases 471. So to get away from plicky bolt and to utilize the brass through its middle life, not when it's just brand new, I'm gonna bump that to 472.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right, so then we're gonna measure the body shoulder junction. And, oh man, it's been a while since I looked at a 6.5 Creed. I think it's 463. So we'll measure the brass, and this is not quite as important as it is back at the base, and we'll measure the brass and say the brass is, I don't know, 460,
Okay.
whatever. And we'll look at the print, and the print is 463, and that we'll measure that, and it's 460, 461, whatever. So I will give that 3 thousandths also, depending on if you're gonna heat treat your brass every time. I would probably squeeze that down to 2 thousandths on the front. If you're not gonna heat treat, if you're not gonna anneal brass every time,
Yeah.
I'd probably give that 3 thousandths, because it's gonna spring back too.
Right, and the annealing will spring back less.
And annealing will
Or
spring-
possibly not spring back at all.
Yeah. So the other dimension you need to know is what neck size diameter you want. Are you gonna turn necks? Are you gonna shoot them right out of the box?
Right, and so for that, you guys can see here, what we're talking about is that's this dimension right here. So this is your neck dimension from here to here,
Yes.
and that's the dimension we're talking about there.
All right, so on a 6.5, it's probably 295.
Okay,
And so what you want to do is you want to load a bullet in a dummy round and measure the neck and see what it measures. On a 6mm, I like 2 or 3 thousandths clearance. On 6.5, 730, probably 3 or 4 thousandths clearance. The second thing about the neck is some necks are designed with taper in them. A half a thousandth, some a thousandths. Just my personal opinion, but I don't like tapered necks, just because it's not going to expand straight on
Yeah.
the bullet. It's going to expand on the back first.
yeah. that makes
So
sense.
whether that actually makes a difference or not, I don't know, but it does in my head.
Yeah.
So I tend to make my necks straight unless it's something really long, like a 6mm Remington, I think is like 375 thousandths long or something. So I put a thousandths in that. But on a 284, where they got a pretty sharp neck, I'd make that a straight neck. And so you need to decide what diameter you want, whether you're, Then the next number out is your free bore. And on accurate shooter, they get it ass backwards every time. They call the free bore the lead. They call the free bore or the lead the throat, and it's not. The lead or free bore is a smooth part
Okay,
before the rifling starts. So on a 284, for example, typically we'll make the lead a half a thousandths bigger than the bullet diameter, which would be 284 and a half. So you need to look at that on the print and see what it is and see if you want to change it. I got the bright idea here a few years ago on my Dasher, or on my 6BR Ackley, that I measured some bullets, some Sierra Burger bullets. They were 243 right where the shank starts, but on the back they were 243 and a half. So I got the bright idea that I'm going to make my free bore tapered, just like the bullet.
yeah,
Yeah? Well, guess what? It didn't shoot worth a damn. When I tried it in a couple of different, it just didn't work.
yeah,
So that's the other thing. And then, of course, your throat, which is your 1.5 degree, 2 degree, 3 degree. Most guys now spec a 1.5 degree because we're shooting C-cam bullets. Back in the old days, when all the bullets were tangent, we shot 3 degree,
okay.
which is a more abrupt.
Yeah.
It's not as flat.
Steeper angle. Yeah.
So the other thing is, how long are you going to make your free bore?
Yeah, and that's something that we talk about a lot, right?
Yes,
Because,
and so I'm going to explain to you how to do that.
yeah,
So what you do is, now if you've got a magazine, you're pretty limited to where you can seat bullets.
right.
On a magazine, I usually have guys seat bullets 50 to 100,000 sharp, so they have a little bit of room to grow. So you're kind of locked in there. But on a single shot, what I tell people to do is to seat a bullet down to where the boat tail junction is just above the donut.
Okay. And so for those that don't know, what we're talking about inside of the brass where you have your shoulder neck junction here, so you have your neck to your shoulder at this point, you can develop what's called a donut, which is the flow of metal that comes up and gets pushed in, and it causes a ring.
Neck, yeah.
It causes a ring at the base of the neck, and if you're inserting your bullet, on the normal situation, the bullet may not be touching it, but what he's talking about is getting to a point where you're pushing the bullet far enough back where it's actually going to touch on those donuts there. And the donuts could be very minor in some cases. Not every caliber produces the same level of donuts.
Right, like on a dasher, if you're turning necks on a dasher and you do it right, you'll never have a donut.
Yeah, and if you start with 284 is like infamous for donuts, but that's typically because you're necking up a 6.5 piece of brass. If you're using a factory 284 like LePou or Peterson, you're much less likely to run into a donut issue.
Because you're necking up from 6.5 to 284, so you're pulling part of that shoulder into the neck, which is thicker, so you instantly got a donut.
Yeah.
And they're hard to get rid of. Yeah. So what I do is I say, see the bullet, make a dummy roundup, so that the boat tail junction is just above where the donut's going to be.
Okay.
Okay. Now, go out right where the shank of the bullet and the ogive starts. Take a magic marker and go around the bullet and make a mark. Get a set of calipers and set the caliper 2,000 smaller than what bullet diameter is. On a 284, that would be 282.
Okay.
And stick the dummy cartridge up against the calipers and turn it. And that will make a mark right where the ogive starts.
Huh.
Okay?
All right.
Then measure from the back of the base of the case to that mark. And that's the number you'll give your reamer maker, and you need to tell him what bullet it is.
Huh.
Right?
That's interesting.
Okay, so then you'll need to tell him, okay, is that a jam number or is that a jump number?
Yeah.
Right? So if you've seated the bullet just above the donut and you measure that, whatever it is, 2 inches and 50, whatever it is, and you say, okay, that's actually a touching number because you measure it out to where the ogive just starts. So that's actually a touching number. So you will need to tell the reamer maker, I'm going to jump my bullets probably 20,000. So I want you to add 20 thousandths to that overall number.
Yeah.
The way I do it is I like to measure from that line back to the face of the neck, right to the end of the neck.
Yeah.
But that's not as accurate. But you have to take some things into consideration because the transition from the neck up into the freebore is a 45-degree angle. So that's about 10 thousandths.
Yeah.
And the neck is going to be back 10 or 15 or 20. So you've got to figure in that 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 thousandths when you give them a number. And I've done it enough times,
Yeah.
And that's just the way I like to do it because what I'm going to do is I'm going to call Sarah over at JGS and say, bring up a 6.5 Creedmoor print. And I'm going to say, okay, this is the changes I'm going to make. I'm going to go to 472 and I'm going to leave the body neck junction the same.
Yeah.
I want you to change the neck diameter from 296 to 295.
Right.
And here's the lead length. I want 190 thousandths, I want 200 thousandths, I want 220, whatever. Also, when you're measuring this for your lead length, don't measure it for brand new barrel. Measure it for 500 rounds down the barrel.
Yeah.
That throat is going to erode a little bit. So take that into consideration. If you spec your reamer off a brand new barrel, especially with something like a 284, it's got a short neck. As that erodes out, and if you chase the lands, you're going to run out of neck. So figure that 500 rounds through the barrel, 1,000 rounds through the barrel. You want to talk to your gunsmith about this, how much he thinks is going to erode 20,000.
Yeah, because every caliber is a little different.
Every caliber is a little different.
Yeah.
So getting the freebore length, or lead, as it's actually called, the right length is the trickiest part. Because there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. You want to talk to your gunsmith and see what he recommends.
So in general, like we deal with 284 a lot.
Yeah.
And, I've run anywhere from a 180 free bore. I mean, I remember when I first started, the reamer we used was a 180 free bore lead. And
yeah, same thing.
And we were using the 180 hybrids. The 184s came out. Everybody freaked out. Oh, I got to get 220 free bore. The 190s came out. Everybody said, oh, I got to go to 250. But to be honest, I found that even the 184 shot pretty well in the 180 free bore. They obviously just have more room to play in a 220 free bore. But if somebody doesn't quite know, and maybe their gunsmith is helping them guess at a correct thing, is it better to be a little over on your free bore or a little under?
A little short. Like on a 284, for example, we're shooting 180 hybrids away.
Sure.
I would seat that in to where it's the boat tail junction is just above the donut, and I would make my mark out there, and I would measure, and I'd come up with whatever the number is, 200, and I would say, okay, what I've got here is, say the number, for example, is 220,000 or 240,000, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a touching number.
Yeah.
I'm going to call that good. That's the number I'm going to give him because the throat's going to erode.
Yeah.
So that means that I'm going to, if I'm chasing the lands, I'm going to seat the blood out. And also in brand new brass, you won't have to worry about the donut. So you could still seat that bullet 20 thousandths deeper down into where the donut would be, and you would be okay.
Still be safe.
You'd still be safe until the throat erodes out far enough. So on a 284, that touching number is what I'd go with.
Okay. So if we kind of made a list, just a really simple list, the things that we're really trying to focus on when we do a reamer is going to be the 200 line.
Yes.
Right? So we've got that looks horrible.
Yeah.
So we've got the 200 line.
We've got the body shoulder jump.
So we've got we'll call it the BS line.
Yeah.
So that's the body shoulder line.
Yes.
We've got
neck diameter.
So we've got neck, and then we've got lead.
Yeah, no, it's L-E-E-D-E.
Ugh, I'm an idiot. Lead
Yeah.
or freeboard.
Freeboard, same thing, yeah.
Yeah. So or
And you've got throat.
So freeboard and then throat. So,
And there's one other thing on the print you need to look at, and that's overall length.
okay.
If for some reason you've got brass that's short and you don't want it to reload 17 times before it gets out long enough. Back when we were doing a lot of dashers,
Yeah.
we actually shortened the neck up on the dasher reamer because when you fire farm a dasher, it shortens up a lot.
Yeah.
10, 20 thousandths. So we shortened that neck up so that you wouldn't have to size it 10 times before it actually got out. So, yeah, you want to look at the overall length, measure your brass, and see where you're going to be there.
So these 5 things, I mean, not that look, there's a lot of gunsmiths out there, and a lot of people struggle to find a good gunsmith. Would you say that if I was new to this and I was trying to find somebody to help me build a reamer, other than going, because JGS will actually help you too if you have the numbers, but obviously you need a gunsmith to help determine some of this.
Right.
So if I called up a gunsmith and said, hey, I'm looking to build a reamer, here's my 5 questions. How do you determine this? If they can't give you a good answer for the 200 line, the body shoulder, the neck, the lead, and the throat, you probably ought to walk away, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of really, really good, well-experienced gunsmiths out there, a lot of them. I'm sure can help you with that. The reason for going through all this is when it's all said and done, you've got a sizing die that perfectly fits your chamber.
Yep.
So you can go the other way, like we talked about at the beginning, and send firegrass off to Hornady or Reading or some way. The problem with that is they're just using different size reamers.
Yeah.
So you're still not even assured that you're going to get a good fit at the neck shoulder jump. I just went through this with one of our friends that shoot with us. He had a 6.5 reamer, 6.5 Creepo reamer that was cutting the body shoulder junction 6/1000 oversized.
Oh, jeez.
So every time he shot, he was fire farming his brass. So we had to send the reamer back and have it reground.
What's the biggest, so, we talk about different reamers, and we're not out to say, this or that about any reamer manufacturer, but with any reamer manufacturer, what would you say is like the biggest problem that you see when somebody gets a reamer? I give it to you, my gunsmith, you go to chuck it up in your lathe. What kind of things go wrong when somebody gets a reamer if it's not made right?
Yeah, the problems that I've had in the past with some reamer makers is, number one, they don't get it to you when they say they will. JGS always does. If they say 3 months or 4 months, it'll be
3 or 4 months, yeah.
The other thing I like about JGS is it'll be on spec. That reamer will be what I told Sarah to draw the...
You never have to worry about it.
Well, I usually measure them just to see, but they're always right on. In the other situation, if you've got a reamer that's too small, you're screwed. If it's too big, you got to send it back and they got to regrind it. Who knows how long that's going to take? And they got to regrind it to the same spec.
Right.
So I don't even use them anymore. I like JGS because they got a couple of guys over there that are really sharp. They understand how to do all this. Matter of fact, Nathan's the one that told me how to measure from the back of the case to the mark on the neck.
Yeah. That's smart.
Yeah, and so if you give him that number and tell him whether it's touch or jump or whatever, he can make the lead accordingly. So I like it because they got people that when they answer the phone, you can get help. The girls over there are fantastic. I know,
and they know what they're talking about.
They know what they're talking, and they can read a print.
Yeah.
And so when you first get a print and look at all the numbers on there, it's really confusing. A lot of those numbers are just for the grinder. Yeah. These are the numbers that you need to be concerned with.
And I'll tell you what I'll do here. We're gonna, at the end of this video, I'm gonna go ahead and put up a picture of my actual reamer spec. And you'll see the print, and I'll circle some of these numbers that we're talking about so that if you're looking at a reamer print, you'll at least know where a couple of these numbers are, because they are really important to know. To be honest, I'd say 95% of the numbers I don't care about, but I know where these numbers are, and that's what's really important.
Yes, and you want to get the numbers right. Nobody likes clicky bolt.
No.
If you're shooting in competition, clicky bolt is really...
It's just embarrassing.
But it slows you down.
It slows you down.
It upsets the gun.
Yeah.
So to go back over that 200 mark for just a minute, 3/1000 to start with is going to seem like a lot.
Yeah.
But keep in mind that the brass is going to spring back, and you're not going to have 3/1000.
Right.
After you've done that 4 or 5 times, you're only going to have 1 or 2,000. So that's just, at the body shoulder junction, I may tweak it 1,000 or 2, depending on what the casting out of the die told me.
And you probably take into consideration the skill level of the person you're doing the work for, right? So somebody who's at a higher level of reloading, higher level of understanding what you're doing, you might be willing to kind of trim that down to maybe a leaner reamer, whereas maybe you got a guy that just needs a reamer print for a hunting gun that he uses and wants to get new barrels for, needs a little more tolerance, something like that.
That's exactly right. If it's somebody that's hunting elk, I'm going to give him more clearance, depending on whether he's going to reload or just shoot factory ammo.
Yeah.
If he's just going to hunt with factory ammo, I'll take the dimensions off of that.
And then you're just golden.
And then I'll give Sarah the dimensions off of the factory ammo.
Yeah.
If that's all, if he's not going to reload, because he don't care, he's going to shoot it one time.
Yeah.
So, but it needs to fit.
Yeah. And it needs to not have a problem in the field.
It needs to be not so tight that if he gets something in the chamber, it won't. Yeah. So for all these different scenarios, it depends on the guy's skill level, depends on what he's going to do, depends if he's going to reload, is he shooting factory ammo?
What gun it's going in, action, barrels, stuff like that.
Yes, exactly. So it's just a matter of doing it for a long, long time, and I'm sure that there's plenty of gunsmiths out there that can do this for you.
Yeah. I'd almost say, kind of in a sneaky way, people struggle to find a good gunsmith. I'd almost argue you could probably call a good reamer manufacturer and say, hey, I'm in this area, who do you sell reamers to that I can trust?
That's a good point. I'm sure you can. Yeah, I've got calls from barrel makers, and I've got calls from reamer makers too, saying, "Well, I just got a call from so-so. He's in your area and he wants to know this or that or the other.
Yeah.
So is it okay if I give him
Yeah.
your number?" Yeah, but JGS has been doing this for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Those people that are there have been there a long, long time. They know what they're doing, and if you run into a problem you can't solve, you can talk to Nathan. He's got the answers. There's a couple of guys over there that do, and so.
Well, here's just two quick things for you that I've seen come up that I'm always curious about, and I've heard a couple different answers. So we're talking about a new reamer. I give it to you. Everything's great. Let's say I get a wild hair, and suddenly I go from turning necks to deciding not to turn necks, and that means that my reamer that used to be spec'd at, let's say, 317 for a neck now needs to be 320 or 321 in my particular case. You don't necessarily need a new reamer, right? If your gunsmith knows what he's doing.
No, I've got what I call throating reamers, but they're actually necking reamers is what they are. So I can give you, I think, a 317, a 318, a 320, and a 321. I think would be the four choices right in that. And also I have, again, throating reamers. So if your lead is too short, we can lengthen it out a little bit. Back in the old days, when I first got started, before everybody got their own reamers, I would spec a reamer with no lead.
And you just use a...
And I would use a throating reamer to make the lead however long that customer wanted it. But now I don't hardly do that much because just about everybody's got their own reamers. Yeah. So you need to find, if you want to get a custom die, what I call a backdoor die, this is the cheapest way to do it. This is the way that you're going to ensure it's going to be a perfect fit to your chamber.
Yeah.
And I guess we talked about this in the other video, but you want to pick a gunsmith. Well, let's talk about headspace in another video.
Yeah, we'll talk about headspacing for sure. One last question. I've had people ask me, I can send this back and get it sharpened, right?
Yes.
How reliable is that? If I've got 20, let's say I've got 20 reamings on this, and I go, and you go, hey John, your reamer's getting a little rough, I'm getting some chatter, whatever it is. Am I better off getting it sharpened? Will that do the same job, or should I just spend a couple $100 and get a new one for how many chamberings I need?
Well, I think they charge, I don't know, $75, $80 or something to regrind a reamer. Those people know what they're doing and they do a good job, so I just have it regrind.
And I won't really lose any dimension that's critical?
No, what they'll do is they will actually, depending on all the circumstances, they may actually move the shoulder back a little bit when they see. That gives them more meat. That gives them more meat on back.
Yeah.
That means they can recut the lead, they can recut the neck a little bit, so they may actually move the shoulder back a little and just regrind the whole
Which has
thing.
no impact on actually using it.
No, because they'll regrind it to the
So it's
same
like setting
step.
back a reamer. No, that's interesting, because in my head, I've never had one sharpened, but in my head, I just assumed that it was like a lawnmower blade. You took it in and they took every surface and somehow went over it and kind of tuned it up. But what you're saying is they might actually just come back a little bit.
They may move the shoulder. They may or may not.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Depending on what the circumstance, depending on how bad it is, or if the guy wants a little change at the time,
Okay.
You could say, okay, here's my reamer print, here's my reamer, but I got the body shoulder junction a little big, can we make that 1,000 smaller?
Yeah.
Or you may say, it's a little tight up there, I need another 1,000 bigger. To get that 1,000 bigger, they'd have to set the shoulder.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, look, I always appreciate your time. You've been, I know you've been telling me, hey, look, let's do a video on reamers. I think this helps a lot, and I hope everybody out there really appreciates the time that Terry's putting into this. We do have plans to do a head spacing video. I can tell you, having talked to Terry ad nauseum about head spacing, it's going to be a good video. So hopefully I can get down to his shop in a couple weeks here, and we can talk about that. But Terry, thank you so much for coming out. and always appreciate what you do
Yeah.
for us. And
Well, I hope you learned something today.
yeah,
I hope you get some good feedback and tell your viewers if they got customers, write it down, and if you don't have the answer, I will.
all right, I'll do that for sure.
Or maybe I will.
All right, guys, thanks for coming by. We'll talk later. Have a good one.